Another nice looking job, Lethal for Willcox.
All right, welcome to episode 4 of the Donnell edition. We're sitting down with freestyle aerial skier Abbey Willcox. This is a really exciting episode. I have a lot of questions, and I'm sure you do too. Abbey, welcome. Thank you very much for giving up some of your time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. It's awesome to be on here.
How's everything going? How have you been?
Yeah, really good. I've just been training at home for the past few months because of coronavirus. We haven't been able to train like we usually would, but now I'm back down in Melbourne and ready to get going again, which is super exciting.
Yeah, awesome. And how does one get into aerial skiing, for starters?
Yeah, it's there aren't many people in Australia that do it, that's for sure. So in Australia, the is we take gymnasts, divers, or trampolinists, and they try a development program and they learn to ski. So it's easier to teach a gymnast how to ski rather than a skier to do the technical components of aerial skiing. So that's how we do it in Australia. And then there are a lot of bars that the development program has to pass to get going in aerial skiing. So there's a certain amount of jumps that you have to do before you're allowed to try doing flips on snow, and we train those jumps into water. So we actually, before we even go on snow, we practice our jumps on a man-made ramp down here in Melbourne at the moment. So yeah, it's a bit of an interesting process, and it takes actually like 3 or 4 years to get up to a competitive level in aerial skiing, from starting in the development program.
So you've come from a gymnast background, is that correct?
Yes, yeah. I did gymnastics since I was 4 years old, and then I did that for 10 or so years, and then stopped that when I was 16 years old, and yeah, didn't really think I was going to get back into any kind of sport, but then this opportunity came up, and it was too good to say no to.
Yeah, definitely. And I guess how did that come about, that opportunity?
Yeah, so I went down to the snow with my family when I was in year 11, so that was 2013. We did a ski trip down there, and I did a trampolining class, and there was a guy who worked in the aerial skiing program at the time that was there running the class, and he saw me doing some skills on the trampoline, and he asked me if I wanted to try aerial skiing, and my response was, "What is aerial skiing?" And he explained to me that I had the opportunity in the future to represent Australia and go to the Olympic Games, and yeah, immediately I was absolutely hooked.
Yeah, amazing. And so what's the first training session like?
In the development program.
Yeah.
When I first started. Yeah, so it was really daunting, that's for sure. Like, I'm from the Central Coast of New South Wales, so I went down to Victoria and joined in the development training team down there. And we first went to Mount Buller and we did some skiing. And it was a really, really exciting opportunity, but it was also really, really nerve-wracking to get out of your comfort zone and try this new sport. So we spent 2 weeks doing a ski camp, and then we went down to these man-made water ramps down at Lilydale in Melbourne, and we practiced jumps for the first time, practiced jumping into water. And they didn't go so well. Definitely landed on my back and on my side. Got a bit of a bruised ego, that's for sure. And I realized how hard the sport was when I started that. But it was also extremely fun and definitely a challenge. And that is what really engaged me, because I really loved the challenge of trying something new and seeing how far I could go.
Yeah, and what was the age group at the first training session for you? Is it spread a lot of ages or?
Well, in Australia, because we're all gymnasts before we start, it was the age ranges between 16 and 18 when you start, and I was 18, so I was on the older end of the age group. Yeah.
And how did that progress into your position with the Victorian Institute of Sport?
So we're really lucky in Australia in aerial skiing. There's a direct pathway when you first join the program, and you jump into the Victorian Institute of Sport straight away, because basically when you start the program, it is a full-time job and it sort of becomes your whole life, because there's so much commitment involved in training and so much moving around. And so it was really cool to be a part of the Victorian Institute of Sport since 2015. And it makes you, like, when you're in the Victorian Institute of Sport and you're just starting this new sport that you've hardly ever done, and you get to see all these amazing athletes in their training, the best in the world, it makes you want to work hard, and it makes you want to really push yourself. So it has really, like, the VIS has been amazing for me in that regard.
Yeah, awesome. So who have you bumped into at the gym?
Well, because I don't really live down in Melbourne, I don't get to go to the gym that often. But definitely the swimmers, like Matt Horton and
cool.
Scotty James, who's also winter sports, like awesome people. Yeah, it's really cool to be around them.
Yeah, and what's your training regime like? Obviously, you just mentioned you don't get a lot of time to spend at the VIS itself.
Yeah.
Can you run us through a training regime for you?
Yeah. So between April and September, it's sort of our off season, and during those times we do water ramping, which is the man-made jump into the water, and we practice all our skills on the water ramps. And that, because we haven't yet had a facility in Australia that has the correct size jumps for aerial skiing, we spend the majority of our time overseas, and we practice all our skills at the moment in Switzerland. Well, not at the moment because of the coronavirus, but previously in Switzerland. And then, so we'll do that during the day, and we'll also do trampolining and strength and conditioning. And that's usually like 6 hours a day, 5 days a week kind of deal when we're over there in the training camp. And then from October until March, that's our winter season. So opposite seasons, we work off the Northern Hemisphere. And that's our World Cup season. So we're training on snow, and we're competing around the world too, changing countries every week or so. So
yep.
Yeah, it's pretty full on.
Yeah, definitely. And how with the man-made ramps, whereabouts are they?
So we have a few small man-made ramps in Melbourne, in Australia, but it hasn't opened up yet, and it's actually opening up next month. But there's going to be some man-made ramps up in Brisbane, so at Fleeman Sports Complex.
Okay.
So we'll be training up there, which is really cool.
Yeah, very nice. And how big are the ramps?
So the biggest one, it's up to 4 meters high, and it's quite a quick jump. It's not a long one. It's very sharp and it shoots you upwards.
Yeah, wow. And when you're doing that, like when you're going through that jump and it's upwards, what's the, I guess the what are you trying to achieve with a shorter ramp, so to speak?
Our sport is judged off a few components, but one of the components is our height and our amplitude, I guess. So we're skiing in and trying to get the biggest jump possible without being too big. You know what I mean? So
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Nice. So so you're trying to go so high but not too high. Is that right?
Yeah. So we're trying to go as high, as big as possible, without doing too many flips, I guess, and going to our back.
Yeah.
Obviously, we still need to try and land and make it look good.
Yeah, definitely. So, I guess with your training, how much of training is spent outside of Australia, if there is any?
Yeah, we spend about 9 months outside of Australia every year. So it's quite a big commitment. Like as I said before, we haven't had the facilities in the past to train to our full potential in Australia. We just haven't had the jump size. So we've had to go overseas and find other training centres. And it's a very big commitment. Like, it's only you and your teammates and your coaches over there. It can be, you can get quite homesick easily spending that amount of time away from home. But if you want to do aerial skiing in Australia, that's just what you have to do. Like, that's just what you have to do for the sport. You don't really have another option. But now with Brisbane, I think we'll be spending about 6 months in Australia and then 6 months away overseas.
Wow. And how expensive is the sport?
It's quite expensive if you do it on your own. So I actually spent a year away from the Australian team, and I was training on my own. And with international flights, food, accommodation, and training, access to facilities, of coaches, it can be, about $30,000 a year just to get, just to be able to train and compete overseas. And it's definitely hard when you're doing it on your own. But luckily, with my scholarship now, with the Olympic Institute of Australia and the VIS, most of that is covered. Definitely the training and the accommodation and the coaching. It makes it a lot more bearable.
Yeah.
And two, because you're away so much, you can't really hold a job at the same time, because training is your full-time job. So yeah.
And how with your coaches, how many coaches do you have?
So I have 2 ramping coaches. One is my main coach, and there's another coach that's the head coach, but he's sort of just in the background a little bit. And then we have a coach for strength and conditioning, and that's the physical coaches, I guess. And then there's also my sports psychologist, who's sort of a coach as well. So there's just a coach or a professional for each aspect of my training.
Yeah. And do any of the coaches travel with you on the competitive circuit?
Yeah. So I'm always with my two ramping coaches, but the other coaches, they come in and out when we're on the world tour. Sometimes we'll see our strength and conditioning coach, mainly in America. He'll come over to America when we're there. Sometimes we'll see the sports psychologist as
Yeah,
well.
yeah. And the ramping coach is intriguing to me. What do they do? What do they coach you in?
Yeah, so they work on the technical aspects of our jumps. So we, as aerial skiers, are doing up to 3 flips, and the men especially are doing up to 5 twists in those flips. So, and it's quite fast, and it's it's there's a lot of technical components to make the jumps look easy and effortless. So that's what our ramping coaches do. They work on the twisting technique and the the landing technique, the takeoff, every aspect of our jump to make it look as good as possible. And also when we're competing and when we're training, they stand on the side of the hill, and when we're jumping, they will yell out in the air either stretch or pull. So stretch means to make your body longer because you're flipping too fast, and pull means to pull your body in tighter so you can get your feet to the ground without landing, in an awkward position that could, if you're flipping too slow.
Yeah, that's interesting because I've heard that a lot. Like when I watch the Winter Olympics, you hear that from the side, and I didn't know what it was, but now, yeah, awesome. So it's your coach is saying, giving you pros on what to do, sort of counting you into the jump.
Yeah. They're just, you usually know what you're doing in the air because you've done it so many times. You know
Yeah,
if you're too big or too small, but they're just there sort of reinforcing something, or if you're making the wrong decision, they're there to tell you to do something else
yeah,
and stay safe at the end of the day.
yeah, definitely. And
Yeah.
I guess what is it? What's a typical week on the competitive circuit? So you've had your first, is it your first podium finish? Is that correct?
Yeah. First
So
podium, first World Cup podium.
So congratulations on that. That was awesome. I actually watched that video, and I'll link it down below because it's incredible. And
Thank you.
what's the mentality for that week? From start of the week, knowing that okay, I'm going to jump, I'm on the competitive circuit, I'm going for it, and then those few split seconds before you take the final push and go. What is that like? I'm really intrigued.
Yeah, it's definitely it's definitely a crazy time of the year because it's between usually December and March, and there are up to like 10 World Cups in that time period, and every World Cup is usually in a different country. So almost every week we're going to a new country, and then we're competing in the World Cup on the weekend of that week. And so we get 3 days of training at the new site before the competition day, and then we compete on competition day. And the competition format, it goes first. There's qualifications in the morning, and so everybody in the field qualifies. They do one jump, and they have one jump to qualify for the finals, which is the top 12 of
Okay.
that day. And then the finals are usually held at night, and um, so the top 12, both men and women, compete. They do the first round, and the top 6 jumps of that first round in both men and women get to go to the super final, and then that's when they battle it out for the podium. So the top 3, both men and women. So it's really intense during that day. It's definitely like physically draining, but also mentally draining. Um, and I guess the moments before I um, do those competition jumps, it's um, a lot of visualizing what I want the jump to be like. It's a lot of positive self-talk. It's um, definitely music to calm me down because I tend to get really tense during competition time, and just basically taking the approach that every jump I do is like a training jump. Not changing anything, trying to keep it all the same, because yeah, it's a lot of pressure, and basically just have to um, just keep it really simple and go out there and do your best. So yeah, there's a lot of things involved to try and keep it all level.
Yeah, and so so how do you actually calm your nerves though? Like, watching that video where you podium third, I can see you sort of, I can see as you're talking through it now, I can understand what you're saying, but like, how do you calm your nerves down? Like, it's obviously a massive, like, you're looking down and you're like, okay, I'm gonna, like, go here. Like, how do you calm yourself down, like, and get the courage to just go?
Yeah, it's taken a lot of practice for me to get to a level that I'm not like overriding with nerves or anxiety before going off a jump. That's for sure. But it's it's more of it's a mental game. The sport, like it's hard physically, but it's a mental game. And knowing that um, I I've done these jumps a million times before, and I've done so many great ones. That's I keep reminding myself of that before I do every jump or before I compete, and that seems to really calm me down, as well as just yeah, self talk and visualization. It's basically just being confident in knowing your ability. Yeah.
And do you have much contact with your team and stuff? Are you very much okay? I need to take some time to myself. That hour or so before the jump. Like, what's the routine like?
Yeah, we on competition day we usually um, spread out a little bit. We don't really have much. I don't personally don't speak to other people, mainly because I'm so nervous,
Oh yeah,
and I just want to yeah take a step back and away from people. And yeah, usually like our team. I love my team and I love my teammates and we get along so well. But I'm definitely a little bit more of an individual person on competition day, so definitely take a take a step back and just get in my own zone, get in my own lane, and only speak to my coach really.
yeah, yeah, definitely. I can understand.
Yeah,
I can understand that sort of. Yeah, obviously wanting to be just with your own thoughts and get into your own head and zone in. Sure.
yeah, definitely.
And I guess, what are the barriers that you've had to overcome in the sport of aerial skiing?
Yeah, so I would say that my biggest barrier um, was a couple of years ago when got I lost my scholarship with the team, basically for some personal opinions. They didn't really want me on the team, and so I had to go out and go on my own for a year and find my own training program and yeah, be really diligent with my work and really knuckle down and find out more about myself and my sport and really push myself. So that was a really um, big barrier to overcome is being by yourself, but still pushing your skills and your strength to try and get back into the team and try and reach goals that they had set for me to get back into the team. And it took a while, but I ended up doing that. And now I've been back in the Australian team for a year and a half now, which has been awesome. Um, So that was definitely the biggest barrier that I had to overcome in my career so far. But other than that, it's it's a big mental sport, and there's always fear. I don't think there's ever been a day where I haven't really been scared,
Yeah.
like going off, launching myself off those jumps. So just it's building that confidence was a really big barrier that I had to do as an athlete, and being okay with the process and the progress and starting off not being good at something and working your way to get better and trusting that the hard work will pay off at the end.
Yeah, 100%. And did you enjoy that process?
Yeah, it took me. It. I mean, there are definitely days. I think everybody has those days where they don't enjoy the process at all. But I've really learnt to enjoy it and take every day as it comes and not look too far into the future as well. So,
Yeah, that's awesome. You're starting to obviously get some of the benefits of that hard work and the patience that you're putting in with obviously a podium finish, which is fantastic to see.
yeah, thank you. Yeah, that podium was super exciting. Like I was definitely surprised that night.
Yeah, that's awesome. And were your parents over there, or your family? Any of your family over there?
Yeah, actually, my parents always come to the competition in America just because it's a really big event in freestyle skiing, and the atmosphere is absolutely electric. And it's easy for them to come over there and see me. So they were there and they got to see my first podium, which was super exciting, and they really couldn't have picked a better competition to come to.
Yeah, definitely. And once you finished and packed up there, where was the next, I guess, location you had to get to?
So the next stop was in um, Russia. So we went straight from the US into Russia, and we had a competition. We had a World Cup there. After that, it was in Kazakhstan and Minsk, so Belarus, and then back to Russia again. So a lot of Russian-speaking countries on our tour.
So your Russian will be pretty good now.
Oh, I don't know about that. But
And how much time do you get between? Okay, you finish, you do your jump, you're on the podium, cool, and then how much time do you get until you're back on the plane with all your kit off to the next one?
it's usually the next day that we leave, actually. So, for example, when I competed in America and I got that podium, I had to go and do some drug testing afterwards. And then I didn't actually get back to my hotel until 11 p.m. And then I had to pack my bags and obviously like want to celebrate a little bit. But like our plane, well, my plane the next morning was leaving at 8 a.m. I think it was. So there was no sleep that night, and that usually ends up being the case after most World Cups. It's usually a plane ride the next day. So it's,
Wow.
yeah, very quick turnaround.
And is it the whole team that's going with you on that same plane?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. We usually travel as a team from country to country. It's just a lot easier with logistics. And,
Yeah.
yeah.
And so, sorry, can you talk us back on how scoring is judged? So, height is one.
Yeah. So our runs are based on three different factors. The first one is air. So that's the takeoff, the height, the distance of the jump, and that's worth 20%. The next factor is the form, and that's the body position, the skis together, the arms in certain places, so a nice body line, a straight, and that's worth 50%. So that's the majority. That's where the majority of your marks are coming from. And then the third aspect is the landing. So you basically just have to land it first of all, and show a stable, controlled landing, make it look as graceful as you can, and that's worth 30%. and then that score, that raw score, is then times by your degree of difficulty. So obviously, the harder the skill, the higher the degree of difficulty. Lower the skill, lower degree of difficulty, and that's your overall score.
Okay. And
Yeah.
with your training, how, like, what are you doing? You're not like, is it weights? Like, are you trying to lift heavy weights? Like, there's a lot of resistance. Like, what is it?
Yeah, there's a lot of squats, a lot of lower body work, because at the end of the day, if you don't land your jump, you're not going to do well. So that's there's a lot of lower body training, a lot of weights, also upper body, because we take a lot of hits. Crashing is just sort of the natural part of our sport, I suppose. So we do a lot of upper body to make sure we can take those hits and get back up and go again. There's not so much need for aerobic training. We do running to keep fit, obviously, and it definitely helps, but it's not an important part of our sport. So it's more like weights and power, agility. Yeah.
And have you had any significant injuries or anything that sort of kept you out of skiing for a little bit?
Yeah, when I did my first jumps on snow, so back in 2016, I fractured my fibula, actually. So I was out for a little bit with a fracture. That's the only bone injury I've had, though, which is lucky. But I've had 2 concussions since then, which haven't been pleasant. So obviously, head injuries are, you can get them if you just land in the wrong position in our sport.
Yeah. And what's the protocol from the medic team? Do they say, right, you need to take 14 days off before you get back on the circuit, or like, what's the go with that?
So there's a physio that travels with us the whole time, and when you get a concussion, you spend X amount of days until you start feeling better, and then they start doing tests, and there's certain tests that you have to pass before you're allowed to move on to the next test, and that process usually takes up to 2 weeks to get back onto snow and get ready again. And obviously, with a heavier concussion, it takes longer, etc. So
Yeah. And then you're slowly back into normal training, slow progression.
yeah, slow progression. So one day we'll just do some training on the bike, and then the next day we might do some weights, and then the next day we'll put our skis back on and go for a ski, and then the next day we might do some really simple skills, and it keeps going up until you're back to normal again.
Yeah. And with your training, do you wear much like sports science equipment, like monitors and stuff like that?
Not really, no. Mainly because we don't really spend much time at the institutes, and we don't really have access to all that equipment regularly.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, we don't really have any of that.
Yeah, cool. So, and with the judging, how many judges are there?
I think there's 4 judges and then 1 head judge.
4 judges and okay.
Yeah, and they are all marking the whole jump, but they look at different aspects of the jump. So one judge will look at the air, one will look at the form, and one will look at the landing.
Right.
But they will still give an overall score and put it all together.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. And how do you spend your downtime away from the competitive circuit?
Yeah, I'm usually I really like being outdoors, and I really like hiking. So I'm usually trying to find a new trail to walk around at home. I really like socializing, so obviously seeing seeing my friends when I'm at home is really nice, because I don't get to see them very often.
Yeah.
And usually yeah, I'm also studying at university, so that also keeps me really busy at the moment. Um, and recently got into a bit of videography and photography, so a few things
Awesome.
like that. Yeah.
Nice, nice. And how how do you stay motivated as an athlete?
Yeah, yeah. It's um, I find that the best thing that's worked for me is always having a carrot dangled in front of me. So obviously, like when I got kicked out of the program, the carrot was to get back into the program. Last year it was to do some new skills on the in training and get on the podium, and now it's also doing some more new skills and making the 2022 Winter Olympics. So like that really helped me, and I guess always wanting to improve, not just as an athlete, but really confront my fears, and that really motivates me, like trying to improve me as a person first. Um, yeah.
Yeah. And do you have any mentors that you sort of look for guidance off, or look and say, like they're doing really awesome things, like that's the pathway sort of I want to go? Do you have anything like that?
Yeah. So my teammate Laura Peel, she just actually won the Crystal Globe, which is the overall. So she was the most uh, consistent skier of the season, and she ended up walking away with that. So I really look up to her, and it's really cool to be able to like train alongside her and see the skills that she does, and really push for those skills. But also Lydia Lassala, she's the Winter Olympic gold medalist in 2010 for Australia in my sport. So she is really cool. She really pushed the sport for women, and I'm hoping to follow in her footsteps for sure.
Yeah, awesome. And when you're
Yeah.
sorry, when you're competing, is there how do you like define what jump you're going to make?
So um, we always in the women's field, the tendency is to qualify with um, your most consistent jump. So I would qualify with a full, which is a double twisting, double flip. And then once you make it into the finals, that's when you tend to bring out your bigger jumps. So yeah, I would start with a double twisting, double flip, and then make it into the super finals, and that's when you would do probably your hardest jump to try and get on the podium. So
Yeah,
there's a bit
wow.
of like a few little tactics to consider when you're thinking about what jump you're going to do.
Yeah. And do you girls in the team, like, do you bounce ideas off each other on, hey, I'm thinking about going for this jump or doing this in the jump? Is there anything like that?
Not really. It's more so with you and your coach.
Okay.
Yeah, if the so in winter sports, there's a lot that's dependent on the weather as well. So if it's a really bad weather day, um, you'll probably downgrade your skills a little bit more because you don't want to risk hurting yourself if the wind is going crazy. If it's a great weather day, you might try a new skill. It just depends. So it's up to you and your coach.
Yeah, awesome. And
Yeah.
um, I guess what is life like as an athlete? You've obviously got a lot of travel involved. You've got some things that may, chip away at you in terms of you're away from your family, away from your friends for a lot of the time. You're on the road. What's it like for you personally as an athlete?
It's a really cool adventure overall. It's really exciting to be able to travel this much for my sport and get to meet some amazing people along the way and get to go to places that you'd probably never go to. Um, so that aspect of it is really cool, and absolutely love that. But yeah, as you said, it's hard to be away from your family and your support group of friends at home for so long. Like, you only get to see them here and there, and it's definitely really hard any kind of relationship as well. So it's all long distance, and it's 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 a challenge, that's for sure. And it's also physically, like, you're very tired, you're on the road the whole time, you're with the same people. Like, my teammates are awesome. Obviously, if when you're with each other 24/7, sometimes there's a little bit of conflict,
Yeah.
and also competing against each other as well. So yeah, it's an awesome experience, but it's also very, very challenging.
Mm. And what's the favorite place you've been to that skiing has taken you?
Switzerland, definitely. I love that country so much. Like, the Alps over there are insane,
Yeah.
and I really love the people as well. So
Yeah.
such a beautiful country.
It is, but it's so expensive.
Oh, I know.
My wife and
I know.
I went there, and we spent a bit of time there, and went up one of the mountains, and beautiful. Once you break that cloud barrier and you get right up to the top, it was incredible. But yeah, the hot chocolate was like about $12 or something. So it was
Yeah,
it was a bit crazy, but
yeah,
beautiful place nonetheless.
yeah. I remember I wanted to buy an avocado at the supermarket, and it ended up being one avocado ended up being 6 or 7 Australian dollars. Like, oh no.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Definitely. And what are your views on or views or aspirations post career? Obviously, you're very early on into the career. You've got a lot going for you at this time. With the podium finish and your progression, you've got a dream there of the Olympics. Anything
Mhm.
post career that you're working on in the meantime?
Yeah, I'm working, like, doing my university degree at the moment, which is a Bachelor of Business and majoring in sports management. So I think I'll end up working in sport no matter what what happens in the next however many years of me competing as an athlete. I'm just, yeah, absolutely, like, I grew up in sport, and would really like to somehow make a difference and make a change, especially in the funding avenue of sport. So uh, that so far is my aspiration after I finish skiing, and yeah,
Awesome.
yeah,
Um, and you started some video type projects in the background. Are you able to mention
yeah,
those?
yeah. So I just started making a couple of vlogs. So there's only one up at the moment because I only released it a couple of days ago. But basically, it's showing my world and what my world looks like for people who don't really understand what I do for a living. Um, and it's also explaining, yeah, the sport of freestyle aerial skiing, and I'm hoping to capture that through my camera and share it with anybody who's interested. So it's more than just a few pictures on Instagram, and people aren't like, well, why do you travel so much? So
Yeah.
just explaining, like, what I do for a living. So that's called Abby's World, and yeah, we'll see where that goes.
Awesome, awesome. I'll be sure to link that down below as well. It'll be good to keep up
Awesome.
with what's happening in your world. We'll be
Yeah,
following the journey to your Olympic campaign, and then I can turn around and say, "Hey, I had you on the show early on in your career, and it was awesome." So,
yeah, that'd be awesome.
thank you very much, Abby. I think that'll wrap it up. Is there anything else you wanted to unpack or have a chat about?
No, that's yeah, absolutely. Like, that was really awesome, and thanks for having me on the show.
No worries. Thank you very much, Abby. Appreciate your time. Really look forward to seeing you in the next round of the World Cup events, which are whereabouts are they being held?
So there will be a World Cup event in China, in Russia, America, Canada, and that'll be going from December until March next year,
Awesome.
providing that coronavirus doesn't knock them out.
Yeah,
So
of course.
yeah,
Awesome. Thank you very much, Abby. Really appreciate your time, and good luck for the rest of the way. Injury-free.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks very much for tuning into the latest episode. If you like that one, be sure to hit that like button. Also subscribe and hit that bell notification to stay up to date with the latest episodes that we bring out. It really helps with the YouTube algorithm. Also, next week for episode 5, I sit down with a good friend of mine, Paul Loger, who is a mixed martial artist out of Brisbane. We discuss how he got started in mixed martial arts and his journey to the XFC Amateur Flyweight title. We'll see you next Sunday at 3 p.m.